David Bywater with Bankers Advertising, and before you sit down, make sure this is not on your chair, okay? And it's an illustration of the type of things that we do. It is a screen cleaner for your computer, okay? And it's a gift. It's a promotional advertising gift. We often give these out to different people for different reasons, but mainly to enhance your brand or to build your customer base or what have you. And the fun thing about it is you can squirt out a little mist, you can use this to wipe your screen down, and you can desanitize your phone or your computer or what have you. I do it on my glasses, but I don't think that it will do a round surface so well, so I won't mess that up with that kind of demo this morning. But anyway, we have this with our gratitude and thanks for being here today. There's also another piece there that's a dispenser of Post-it notes that also kind of illustrates what we do as Bankers Advertising Company. Again, I'm David Bywater. I talked to Gabe earlier this morning, and I understand he's the guy that can help me update that photo and add the gray hair that's necessary for it. All right, here you go. Bankers Advertising Company was founded in 1896 here in Iowa City by my great-great-grandfather. He's the man that's up here in the far left. His name was S.W. Mercer, Samuel Wakefield Mercer. He moved out here from Ohio to start a newspaper. He started the Iowa State Press here in Iowa City and then sold it in 1904 after he started our company in 1896 and said, I like the printing and advertising business a lot better than the newspaper business, and he got out of it. And the press became what you know as the Press and Press Citizen. Those two papers came together in 1920 and slowly took the other papers out of the market. There were 4 in Iowa City at one point in time. He had 2 sons that ran the company as well. Mercer Park, if you know it in Iowa City, is named by the guy in the upper right-hand corner. Leroy Mercer was in the legislature for a long time. His biggest responsibility was he ran what was called the interim committee. And the interim committee met when the legislature didn't meet. In fact, the legislature only met every other year. And I sometimes wish that we could get back to that. But at the same time, that was his claim to fame, as well as developing Highway 6, which was at one time a bypass. And if you've driven it recently, you know that it's anything but. 5 generations of business, participants in our business at this point. We started with the premise in the promotional advertising business that you had to make what you sold. And so Bankers Advertising Company focused on selling bank supplies. That's where the name came from. And we worked very hard producing bank supplies, deposit records, checkbook files, that sort of thing. And calendars. In other words, we did a lot of calendar manufacturing. If you come visit our facility, you'll walk by a calendar that we made in 1906. It's hanging in the entryway. We're very proud of it. Someone found it and sent it to us about 30 years ago, said you really need to have this. And of course, we framed it and put it on the wall. It shows a neat picture as well as an advertisement for a company that made stump pulling equipment. And the Monarch Rubber Company is long gone, but at the same time, if you needed a stump pull back in 1907, you might call them for that particular product. Along the way, we got into the manufacturing of yearbooks. At one time, we were the largest importer of jelly into Johnson County, Iowa. We repackaged Smucker's products into what we called the old-fashioned gift line of promotional jelly, and we sent it out as a business gift at the end of the year. Had fun with that. We've been in the software business along the way. Mark can tell you more about that story if you really want to know it, and some other fun things here and there. We've stayed true to the calendar production, though. We still make calendars. Some of the products that we make are similar to what we did back in 1907, that product that was hanging on the wall. What we do now, we got a little video to show you. We are in the physical media business. Okay, so the example that I handed out, you greet people with a standing ovation. That's very, very nice. We give gifts usually at the end of the presentation, but today we did it before, with the idea of being as an illustration. Physical media, tangible products that carry a message. And that might be in the form of a printed piece, so in other words, we do a lot of commercial printing. It might be in the form of a promotional item.
We manufacture custom print and promotional products designed to maximize your brand exposure. Long story short, that branded pen in your hand? Yeah, we sell that. That logo calendar you plan your life by? Yeah, we sell that too. Show off your brand and advertise in style. Heighten your brand identity. And even better, brand engagement. We've got you covered. We're Bankers Advertising and Truer, and we're your one source for all things branded.
Marie's an employee with our company, and she's a terrific actress. We appreciate very much her willingness to do the video. We think she's a natural. She put that together for us for the Iowa Association of Business and Industry Conference this summer, and we continue to play it on your website if you want to see it more. The whole point of that video is to show you that we're not only a distributor of promotional advertising, we're also a producer of it, and do a lot of manufacturing right here in Iowa City. Again, tangible items that carry a message, promotional products, printing, calendars, apparel, and so forth. We have a national market, okay? You might think about that in terms of how you might buy those items or use those items. We remit sales taxes in 40 different states. We have fun with salespeople that are spread all over the country. When my phone rings, I don't know where the call is coming from. It could be New Jersey, it could be Idaho, it could be places in between. Those are the projects that I'm currently working on and having fun with. We employ 100 people here in the Iowa City Industrial Park, and are very proud of the fact that we continue to do that. Why am I here today? Because of Paul. Paul asked me the other day, he said, you guys bought a company recently, would you come tell this group why you did that? And I thought, that's an excellent idea. I'd love to tell you why we did it, but I also would like to tell you what we're struggling with it, related to it, okay? Why we went down the journey of purchasing this, and then our thought processes about what we're going to do next. So I hope to get something out of this too, as does Paul, and I hope I don't embarrass him in the process. There are a competing printer. You know, somebody here in Iowa City that was doing production work like we do. We both competed for work out at Pearson, for example, and I would see Dennis, the operator of that company, quite often when we were visiting about Pearson or out both calling on them at the same time. They're an apparel decorator. They did something for us related to our business. We sold decorated apparel that was screen printed, and they were one of our contract screen printers and did a nice job with that for us. They had complementary equipment, as it says, an experienced workforce, and they had local market share. So those were all the reasons that meant to come together. They also had somewhat counter-cyclical sales, and I'll get to that in a minute, because that's where our challenge lies, okay? But the big deal was that Dennis, the owner of the business, said, I'm retiring. And we had a choice. We said, look, we have a source here that we value, that we like. Do we want to see the source go away, or can we somehow, some way integrate that into our own production processes and so forth? So that was the debate that we had. We took a look at the advertising industry. Here's some information for you that you might be aware of. Advertising overall is growing in our country. This is U.S. media spending provided by Advertising Age. Of course, the top of the heap is now internet advertising. You're well familiar with that. The growth of internet advertising is actually slowing slightly, but it's still growing and ever present, and so forth. Television advertising, you see the next statistic there, rather static. Live TV seems to be where that is. I found some interesting data recently about television advertising, about how targeted it can now be with the age of digital TV. If Mark Nolte and I lived right next door to each other, there's a good chance we would watch different advertisements even if we're watching the same show. And you guys probably know more about that. And it is based on demographic differences between he and I. And therefore, you don't buy a show anymore, you buy a market, you buy a target when you buy television advertising. I find that interesting. You've heard a lot about the demise of the newspaper. And I'm glad that my great-great-grandfather decided he didn't want to be in the newspaper business anymore. In the 50s, it was a $50 billion industry. He might have wanted to ride it up to that point in time and then sell. But at the same time, he got out. We watched that industry go up and down. And so I combined, for the purposes of this slide, radio, newspaper, and magazine advertising. Radio advertising tends to be holding its own and is pretty steady, but the newspaper is declining on average about 8% a year over the last decade. Sales promotion is the piece that we're talking about, including promotional products. And I put this slide here to say, okay, there's growth there. And that's why we're excited about expanding our business related to it. An $85 million piece, and of which promotional products is roughly $24 billion. Okay? We'll move on. Here's a little bit more about that industry. The promotional products industry grew in 2018 12%. That's pretty good, double digits. We'll take that. The interesting thing about it is that small distributors of promotional advertising grew faster than the large ones. Okay? Now, who's familiar with large purveyors of promotional products? Anybody ever heard of the company called Thor Imprint? Okay? They're a large online provider of promotional advertising. They run a portal. In other words, essentially what it is folks put their products out there for sale, and you're buying them through their portal, so to speak, and they get a spin off of that and work very well. And they command the market. They're about a $700 million company overall. There's a company that closely competes with them that is a traditional, you might consider brick and mortar, but it's a traditional sales force that's out there selling, called Halo Advertising. And Halo, what they do is have independent contractor and employee salespeople all over the country selling their products as well. They are roughly a $680 million business. All right? So they're growing, and in those two organizations we think are competing to try to see who can be the first billion-dollar provider of promotional advertising. If you look at the list of promotional advertising providers, the top 40 starts at that $700+ billion range with Thor Imprint and falls down to about $10 million. In other words, it falls out pretty quickly as far as those participants are concerned. But there's over 22,000 different distributors of promotional advertising, so it's still a very small industry with a lot of smaller providers in it that provide good personal service related to the things that they do. So the industry now has roughly 25.3% of it being online. You might think of it all going that way. It might, but it probably won't. And it probably won't because of the degree of the customization that goes with the product. In other words, a lot of consultative selling that goes on related to the industry. And in fact, you see the next statistic that I think is kind of interesting, 15.2% of what is sold in our industry comes from non-industry sources, okay? So for example, we are asked annually to help the University of Iowa with different projects. One of them is the plaques that go on the side of Kinnick Stadium. We actually provide that. No one would necessarily think about us doing that, but we actually have had a connection with a vendor that we've worked with over the years. We create the artwork, we work with the vendor to do the bronze casting and so forth, and then deliver that to the Kinnick Stadium to a contractor who puts it up on the wall. So, fun thing, here we are. A little bit about the industry then as it relates to apparel. The biggest portion of that industry is now, the promotional products industry, at 29% is apparel, okay? And what do I mean by apparel? It might be the logo of the golf shirt that you're wearing, it might be the hat that you have on your head, it might be the jacket that you put on, all of that stuff and junk. Nice deal. They break it down to say t-shirts 15.1%, polo shirts 8.6%, caps and headwear 7.4%. You could see the statistics there. So there's a lot of apparel. In addition, bags are on that list as an interesting thing. And we produce a lot of bags here in Iowa City, or we decorate them using our existing embroidery equipment. Here's a little bit more information about those sector sales presented in a different way and who buys. And so you can see there on the left that education, healthcare, financial and insurance, and so forth continue to be the largest markets for promotional advertising. So we have kept the name Bankers Advertising Company because yes, we still enjoy selling to banks, but it still represents a pretty significant portion of our market. So in April this year, we decided that we would buy a promotional printer here in Iowa City. In other words, this apparel manufacturer. It's a company called Graphic Printing and Design. It was run by the Albright family. And the Albrights were dear friends of ours, folks that we enjoyed working with. Dad Harold passed away about 3 years ago. Dennis and Liz were operating the business as brothers and sisters here in Iowa City. They came to us and said, Dennis said, I'm going to retire. Liz said, I want to continue. Could we get together? And so that's what we did. And now the bigger question. We spent the summer bringing together the two businesses, relocating graphic printing into a space that we had, learning about the business and understanding what decorating apparel with screen printing was all about, some of the tricks of the trade related to that, trying to figure out workflows, trying to figure out things like how can we use the synergies on our campus, for example, artwork and film development and so forth. Yes, we still use film to make a screen, and so on, to bring these two organizations together. We've done all that. Now we're trying to figure out our best go-to-market strategy related to it. In other words, they're operating, they're profitable, they're in a space that we're happy with. We're making deliveries. We never missed a customer deadline, almost. We never stopped running, even the portion of days when we were moving. We moved equipment from one spot to another and kept one line going while the other one was being set up and so forth. So we looked at this and we said, okay, of course we can expand our operation with existing company stores that we have. We, of course, have corporate programs that we're selling and so forth. We can use it as a recruiting tool. If you think about our business, we were in the embroidery business before. Now we're in the screen printing business as far as decorating apparel. The two of them represent a significant portion of our overall platform. What we're finding is that yes, if we look at local competition in particular, and across the street, for example, you have Underground Printing, and around the corner there's another one. The whole idea is that different people have different approaches in different parts of the market that they want to go after. Our forte really isn't serving the local customer in terms of small orders, for example, college and university, say sororities and fraternities that have an event going on. We'll do that. We're happy to do that. We'll work with City High School for their spirit wear. Right now we have an order that we're doing for their band, for example. And it's nice business and it's good people, but it's not necessarily what we're looking to do. Our forte, for example, more is along the lines of supplying the corporate side of this equation. So Kent Feeds is a big customer of ours down in Muscatine. And we do apparel for them for their home office, we do it for their dealers, we do it for their trade show staff, and so forth. And we do it as customer gifts and so on. That's where we really excel. And we do that for a lot of different people where they want want to end up putting apparel on either their own people or as a gift to their customers and so forth. And so we're working to expand that now, and part of the reason or way that we can expand it is to say, look, we've got this organization, we are the manufacturer, we do the decoration, we control this, and therefore we can reprioritize every day. I had an email this morning asking about a staffing question. Well, it's not really my issue, but I think I'm solving an internal struggle about what our biggest priorities are today. I emailed back and said, what does the data tell us? But we're trying to figure out how best to deploy people to meet one of those special deadlines that we got. We had a fun story a couple weeks ago where the University of Iowa Physics Department was having a big presentation. Remember to whom?
NASA.
Yeah, the head of NASA was coming. And the head of NASA had never been to the University of Iowa before, which we found rather surprising. But anyway, he came. And about 5 days before he came, the university had this great idea. They said every person in the physics department should have a shirt that they can wear. You guys all have shirts, right? Well, they started asking. No one had a shirt that said physics on it. Physics and astronomy and so forth. And so anyway, we produced not only shirts for the staff to wear, a nice polo shirt that they could wear, but we also produced a t-shirt for every student that was involved in the physics program. And yes, we had them there on Thursday so that they could be all dressed up and ready to go on Friday when NASA showed up and presented a nice look and a unified front to say, hey, we're excited for you being here. That's one of the powers of doing business locally. It's also one of the fun things in our industry is how we respond to clients and make that go. Let's see. So this is the slide where I'm going to quit and turn it over. I think we have questions. I have a couple more slides and so forth, but and we can get to that as we go. We think now we have more expertise related to apparel. We think now, in addition to embroidery, we have the complete picture because we can do both embroidery and screen printing. Embroidery tends to have a higher perceived value and last a little longer. Screen printing tends to be more durable in certain settings. So that's why you tend to see more t-shirts for road races or construction companies or what have you being done with t-shirts and screen printing because they can be washed over and over and over again and they tend to still look good for a longer period of time. With our two facilities together, we now have some lower overhead costs. We're kind of excited about that. We have some purchasing power, and we also have the ability to utilize our people a little differently. So yes, people that were trained to run embroidery machines are also trained to run screen printing machines, and vice versa, or do the post-production steps that are necessary to make the product look good for the customer when we deliver it. That might be polybagging it or trimming out the finished piece to make it look nice on the embroidery side. Or sometimes we steam it and fold it up nicely so that when you take it out of the bag, it looks really, really nice. We don't expect you to wear it right away, but at the same time, we want the presentation to be good. Because remember, we're giving you a gift when we give those items out. We're looking at equipment and saying, okay, what's the next step related to this? And we're saying, gee, this is traditional screen. Do we want to get more into the digital side of the equation? There's some really neat digital equipment out there. In our past, the predecessor owner, Dennis, said, I'm not sure I want to be in the digital screen printing business or the digital apparel decorating business. He said you can do some really neat things in small quantities. But what happens when the phone rings and the customer said, I need 5,000 of those? It's a very hand-operated orientation where you put the shirt on, put it in, you wait for the inkjet to do its job. And it's not necessarily meant for scale. There are machines out there that are meant for scale if you can find the right finisher. In other words, machines that will decorate both the fabric and digitally print that. And then you need to convert it into the product that you need. We're looking at that a little bit too because we think that's kind of interesting. Maybe we could convert using all the neat people that sew down in Kelowna. I'm grossly stereotyping, but I also know that there are people out there that love to make quilts and so forth and so on. And we have some family connections to people that do that. And maybe there's an opportunity. Maybe there's a business chance there. We'll see. So anyway, we are right now in the process of leveraging our location and our staff. We think we've got a unique advantage too because we're in the middle of the country. That's long benefited us with our calendar business because we're 1 to 2 days shipping most addresses east of the Rocky Mountains. That's a good thing. So we'll use that and see what's going on. We're also coming upon our gift season where we do the most business with our business the last quarter of the year. And so we'll have fun seeing if we can actually execute and make it all work. And that conversation earlier this morning about how best to deploy our staff is going to increase, I'm going to guess, over the next 6 to 8 weeks as opposed to decrease. Anyway, so Paul asked me why we bought this. And in summary, I'll simply say we realized that we had a good opportunity to continue using a valued source and work with people that we long trusted and enjoyed working with. And now they're part of our team. We think that's really neat. We realized that we have an opportunity with this organization to round out the presentation or the production capabilities that we have here in Iowa City. Okay? In addition, we are utilizing our overhead better. And when you look at the industry data, it suggests that there's growth, and there's growth in that particular product category. So all those are good things. At the same time, the printing industry is going through a really interesting metamorphosis at the moment, particularly ink on paper. And so we're looking at that equation and saying, gee, making investments in printing equipment for paper purposes probably is not a good thing at the moment. We stay true to our roots. We really like the fact that we still make some of what we sell, like my great-great-grandfather. We still like the fact that we control the production that way and say, you know what, we all sit within 100 feet of the equipment, so if we need something special today, we can work and manipulate that. So, a little bit about the business, a little bit about who we are and so forth. Questions about the screen printing business or questions about Bankers Advertising Company? You promised to heckle.
I did promise to heckle you, David. This isn't a heckle. So if I'm in some other state, Colorado, California, whatever, and I get online, I'm like looking for a quote for various types of shirts that come up. Am I going to see a Google ad from TrueArt, Bankers Advertising? I mean, how do you navigate your internet advertising?
You will not at the moment, and that is a really good question, because one of the things we're struggling with is our go-to-market strategy and how we've done it traditionally over the years. In fact, this presentation here is something that's a little bit novel for us, all right? This fourth generation said he never wanted to see those two logos together. We had a customer about 5 years ago say to us, your business is too confusing to me. I enjoy working with this person in your organization related to promotional advertising and apparel, but for some reason you send me another person who wants to talk to me about print or decals. We are in that business, signage as well. And you might send me a third person to talk about another aspect of your business. Why those different people? In fact, we realized when we looked at the equation with this particular account, it was Kent Feeds down in Muscatine, we actually had 4 people calling on it. And the head brand person there said, I really only need one. And he said, and my promise to you is that I don't expect that one person to know everything. What I do expect them to do is know about your organization, who to bring into the conversation. And I will respect that he or she will say to me, I don't know a lot about that, but I will bring in so-and-so to come talk to you about apparel, or I will bring in so-and-so to talk to you about the calendar program that we have, and so on, okay? So we looked at this and we said that actually made a lot of sense to us. Thank you, Kent Feeds, for pointing out to us that we were confusing you as a customer. And we started putting these two logos together and putting the company's sales forces together to try to figure out how best to present ourselves. And so we've been working on that. In fact, we think that in the not-too-distant future, one of those logos is going to go away so that we don't confuse the market so much. And then it makes internet advertising all that much easier for us because it's one brand. It's one presentation. We're trying to do the same thing. So, you know, one of the ways, you heard me mention earlier, I defined our business saying we're in the physical media business, was to bring together those two presentations. The previous generations loved the fact that we could say, well, gee, we're in all these different markets doing all these different things. Printing was a separate market from promotional advertising and so forth. Well, really, they're all about products that carry a message. So how do we present them together? And the argument at the time was, well, gee, will a person who's used to buying advertising from one person buy printing, which is a custom project and has a lot of nuances to it, you know, trust the person to sell them the print? Well, maybe that argument was more sophisticated and problematic 10 years ago. We don't think that that argument really holds today. Yes, it's custom, we know that, but a lot of things are customized, and the idea is how do you digitize that and make that work. So yes, as we evolve and put those two organizations together more, you'll see a more consistent presentation, we think. Sir?
Well, I'll kind of question that potentially as going into it. I think that the nice thing about digital advertising, especially like Google, is you get the chance to play both off each other to start with to see what's going to work, rather than just kind of making a decision saying, hey, we think this is going to work. You actually can just, you know, run ads on both brands and see what messages are resonating before you kind of, because, you know, you and you'll know. Because the internet, you know, especially like a Google search, a lot of that is people, it's like one-off hits. You know, you get it, they'll either go buy whatever and then they're gone. And so I think that might just be interesting to consider, is that it's a lot cheaper and easier and faster to kind of explore it and get the data rather than other methods of advertising.
How many customers do I want that are one-off hits and gone?
Well, I think I would say no, you don't want a lot, but it could be a way to test to see what messages or what is resonating before you kind of make it. You know, you can have an ad that lands on a totally different looking page, and if that's converting, then you're like, this is clearly like what's working, rather than saying we have to always be, you know, is kind of what I was trying to say.
So, and I think you have to arm to something there. We created another brand for our business at one point in time, with the idea being that we needed to work around a particular problem. Bankers Advertising Company actually goes to market 4 different ways. They have independent contractor salespeople that are out there. We have employee salespeople here in Iowa and Indiana, 2 different groups that we have working with them. And then we have a group in Iowa City that's designated to handling what we call dormant or orphaned accounts. And then we have a company store program. In other words, we're out there working with different folks very specifically in a targeted online setting. We really don't do a lot of just general, here's our internet play, hoping to get Joe Consumer out there to pay attention to our particular product or brand. But we started a little company called Beyond Your Brand. And if you ever want to name a company and go through the exercising of doing that, it's really quite difficult to find something that's distinct and unique and interesting. But we came up with that, and it passed muster as far as the legal nature of it. That's something that we could use. And so we have been experimenting a little bit, but we're probably don't have enough of an expertise to say, in this market we've had this success. One of the things we tried was to put out, we did both a mailing and an online advertising piece to the segments where we did not have a specific sales rep, because we were worried about competing with the people that we might be currently having associated with our business one way or another. And so we picked South Dakota and a part of Texas, where we could do a direct mail campaign with a little calendar in it, as well as do some saturated, very specific internet advertising. And so we did get some data that suggested that was a strategy that could possibly work for us. We haven't taken the next step to say, okay, how do we build that out in a way that we think is interesting? So, sir?
So I just want to make sure, so one of the challenges that you face is that you don't really want just any kind of customer like ordering, a couple of t-shirts, right? Is that what I'm understanding? That you're hesitant to enter the digital space because you want to qualify your customers a little bit more than that.
We think the corporate space is better, okay? And we think that if we can talk to a Kent Feeds or a Rock Collins Aerospace or a principal down in Des Moines or a Shelter Insurance in Columbia, Missouri, and work specifically with them, that's a better play. We get more consistency of purchase. And so one of the things we've worked with is to say, okay, we have a brand expertise in terms of managing those types of things, where we've been very specific about going out and saying to you, our value proposition is, how do we present your brand consistently? And do that with internet capabilities to allow, say, insurance agents or dealers of feed products or what have you to order that product. And then we're charged with consistently producing it so the presentation is consistent over and over again. So it's not that we are not excited about the small order. We do lots of small orders all the time. We know that it's more profitable for us to be working in a larger scale. And so our play is more, how can we use that technology to very specifically address the needs of larger organizations, whether it be folks like the University of Iowa or otherwise. And the university is a good example of somebody who's very specific about brand management and utilization of their brand. And we spend a lot of time on campus advocating for the licensing department at the University of Iowa, saying, no, they want you to do it this way because, and we spend time very specifically covering it. So, sir.
It's interesting. I don't really know this space, but I imagine that as manufacturing becomes more automated and shipping becomes more automated, the production side margins are going to go down to zero. So I'm just curious, how much your business is focused on the manufacturing versus more the advertising? So for example, if a customer comes to you, says like, I want a brochure But based on our understanding of the market, we recommend you actually do this sports jacket embroidery instead, or whatever it is to fit, something to help guide them.
So about 2/3 of it is sales organization, or organized or focus, sales focus, and about a third of it is the manufacturing.
Okay.
Okay? And what's interesting about that third is that the calendar business that we do, in other words, manufacturing promotional calendars for people, is about 2/3 of that production work. It used to be 50-50 that with commercial print, and the commercial print has fallen way off. So, to your point to some degree. Do we sell apparel in place of promotional a promotional calendar or printing? Sometimes. In other words, we have people that argue, gee, I like a promotional calendar because the impression exposure that I get related to that. And the argument is that I place that in a home or an office setting or what have you, and I've got one person referencing it. They might 2 or 3 times a day understand not what day today is necessarily, but what they have going on in their lives coming forward. They use it as a planning tool, if you will. Well, if you think about a piece of apparel, and you watch people walk by this facility right here, there's a lot of impression value related to that too. And so, you can make the same kind of argument depending on what the customer wants to accomplish. If it's about brand awareness, okay, yes, putting a decorated shirt on somebody as they go about, their daily lives can be very effective for you. And so you're seeing that related to promoting various businesses. Pancheros, for example, loves to hand out T-shirts at the Iowa basketball games, right? Mainly because they want to see people walking around campus with their shirts on. Walking billboards, if you will. So I don't know if we necessarily go about trying to substitute one product or the other. We probably should think about that in terms of what's the most effective. And we can get more data from various trade associations or Advertising Age to say, here's what's really working and here's what's not. What I find funny is the effort that people will make to get a promotional item. Gabe, did you have a question?
It more went to like the digital space and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking to get corporate client, say going to Procter & Gamble, you can do a custom content. Say, hey Procter & Gamble, we can do this for you, and then show them an example. When you can do it all in house, and I'm sure take you 10 minutes to make something up, but you could then target their advertising department or managers or something like that through advertising, and you can get all that information through Google and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even plug it into Google, and then you can see on the website how it would do. Like say you're targeting Procter & Gamble, or if we targeted them this way, you might get this exposure. And you can actually be very specific in who you go to at this company.
So we have 37 schools that we added last year under our licensing program doing a similar situation or program like that. In other words, we realized a couple of different things. One, that we had this licensing capability, that we managed that well, that we could take that out to different schools, and that in addition to the university space, that small colleges were dealing with some of the same branding issues. My daughter started at Wartburg this fall, and I went to their bookstore. Of course, Dad, I needed to have a shirt. I was amazed at how many different colors of orange I saw on the shelves there. Okay, Wartburg's colleges their colors are orange and black. Anyway, limited consistency related to that, but at the same time, okay, it made it work and so on. We added 37 schools last year through a direct mail campaign as well as a service contact pointing out and doing the research to say, these are the people that are specifically buying this, therefore can we be in front of them, realizing that their biggest problem is both recruiting and retention of students right now. And students love promotional merchandise. You need evidence of that. Go to their orientation and watch how they glom onto free stuff. It might be school supplies that they need. It might be a shirt that they need. My older daughter goes to Purdue, and one company handed out umbrellas. Well, it seems like every kid at Purdue is walking around with one of these companies' umbrellas. So they did well saturating the market, same kind of thing. So yes, do we go to the point of saying, okay, very specifically, buying a very strategically placed ad that only they would see based on their demographics, whether that be through Google or Facebook advertising or what have you. We haven't pulled the trigger. Is anybody more successful with that? Do you have a story that you could share with me that says, yes, this really worked for me?
I probably think of some. It's been a while, but I used to work at McGrath,
Where?
At McGrath.
Uh-huh.
And when social media media first became, really heavily intertwined with business and Facebook advertising became a thing, it was just incredible, in like 2 years, they went from like 9 to 16 locations and the amount of business that we were bringing in based on that. But what I was actually going to say is that I think it can be easy to underestimate the importance of your digital presence. Like, yeah, you want corporate clients, but if you think about it, like if I'm a buyer, say I'm the person in charge of this decision for a university, I might narrow it down to a handful of companies, and then I'm going to investigate that situation online, and yeah, maybe like the actual way I do business with you in this situation is not going to be like I'm just going to be in Google like searching away, but at the same time, that's a really important touch point. And it could be that I have like, okay, these are the 6 companies that can handle this need I have. Maybe your online presence just rules you out, and you never even know about that.
You're right.
You know what I mean?
That may be the case.
So, it's just a thought, But my actual question though is, are you guys the ones that has that like a complete catalog? I heard on the radio, I thought it was an interesting way to do the free gift thing. They were like, it was like a radio ad, and it said, they do the same kind of stuff as you. They were like, call this number and get a free catalog. Is that you guys?
No, that's not, but we also have a catalog, and we can send that out to you and so forth. In fact, we're in the midst of our giving season. One of the slides I didn't mention to have got into the whole tariff situation that is causing that cataloging business to be upside down. But large organizations like ours are leveraging relationships with vendors to say, you got to commit to this period, and we're able to get that done. But, so yes, the mix of physical media, like the catalog, along with the electronic response, we think is really important. Again, if I go back to, a couple of slides ago, part of the reason we did this was to be able to say we're not only representing these products. Okay, so if I look at the largest provider of promotional advertising in the country, again, it's back to 4imprint, they don't manufacture anything. They don't control the production related to their process at all, except for saying to the vendors that are on their portal, you have to maintain this standard of quality, you have to maintain this standard of pricing, and you have to maintain this margin that we're going to get off the sale of your product. Okay. It's actually a recipe that we can compete quite well with if we get the chance to compete. There was a question over here. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So you talked about this being 5 generations old,
Yes.
right, for this company. So thinking forward 5 generations, instead of looking at what markets you're looking at online, I mean, another approach would be looking at your sustainability in terms of the materials that you're producing and a cradle-to-grave life cycle. So, I mean, I think that if you're looking at, marketing or advertising in that lens, that would really set you apart. And particularly when you're looking at colleges and universities and, corporate entities, they're looking to reduce their footprint. And, certain colleges and universities actually have those plans in progress looking to reduce it. So you would put yourself ahead of the game in terms of that, and people would actually seek you out based on searches that are more aligned with sustainability, green infrastructure, cradle-to-grave cycle. And, these types of promotional materials can be one-offs. And so that is only causing problems for future generations. So.
It's a really interesting question, because what we find people gravitate to are those one-offs, but we ask the same things. In other words, what's the difference here? Have you ever heard of an organization called the Forest Stewardship Council?
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so what do you know about the Forest Stewardship Council?
It said they source materials from trees, like areas that are replanting in certain areas, so that you're offsetting your whatever wood products that you're.
Right. What they are trying to do is focus on the sustainable growth of the forests around the globe. Okay, and how do we maintain forests in a way that represent both good land practices and be good stewards of the environment all the way through? And if you participate in the Forest Stewardship Council program, what you do is certify that you're treating and identifying either your portion of the wood product in a way that cares for the environment very specifically. Okay, and it's a chain of custody situation. So we were a Forestry Stewardship Council provided printer or certified printer. Okay, and what that meant is that if you wanted to buy a product that was certified, we could trace the origins of your printed piece back through the paper process, distribution, milling, pulping, to the forest it was grown in, and we were able to say, here is where your paper came from for your printed product. okay? And the deal was is that we could therefore certify your piece. That process started with us in 2007. We gave that process up last summer, realizing that of the thousands of orders that we had, 155 of them were impacted by the Forestry Stewardship Council certification. In other words, our customers would take it as long as we provided it without any extra expense or otherwise. We didn't charge them anymore. In fact, you can still get Forestry Stewardship certified paper from us. We're just not offering the certification anymore because it was not a driver of commerce. We found that really interesting because, like you, we said we think this should be something that we should, manage all the way to from the impact of our product. And we think the paper good has a much greater significance related to sustainability than the plastic one does. Okay, so in other words, if I have this calendar here, for example, this is one of the things that was manufactured in our plant, it's completely recyclable. You can take the wire and put it in a recycling tub at the Iowa City reclaiming site on the east side. You can, of course, recycle the paper, and the paper is recyclable up to 7 times. It's interesting how that market is changing. We used to be able to get easily 10% post-consumer recycled content paper, either coated or uncoated, that we could provide in this product. Most of that is now going to box board as opposed to fine printing papers, in other words, recycled content. And what they realized was the important thing about it was if you wanted to reclaim those fibers to make fine printing paper, again, you had to use a lot of bleach to do so. And bleach really isn't any good for the environment and really isn't a sustainable process anyway. And so it made more sense for it to go towards the box board business. So yes, we want to do the sustainable thing. We're interested in following and working with our market to determine how can we do that best. We're right now working with a local organization to see if we can't be more impactful in Johnson County related to that and using paper products and an understanding related to it as opposed to the global side of it. It's an excellent question.
Yeah,
And
it doesn't just pertain to the products, but your company itself.
oh, of course.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's opportunities there as well.
Yeah, no, we trace our waste stream and we manage what goes into the dumpster and what doesn't. And we work to try to minimize that to, we used to, when we were downtown in the Brewery Square building for a long time, and the dump truck would show up every day, the garbage truck would show up every day to take it. We reduced our waste stream through a process that we had in our business to 1 pickup a week and a dumpster that was half the size.
That should be somewhere in your marketing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sort of.
I mean, so 2 points. One is kind of second up for, the last 2 industries that I've worked in, we struggle to find promotional materials that we wanted to get out to our customers.
Sure.
And a lot of it is because we weren't looking for plastic trinkets or paper. We were looking for genuine things that they could use. And so I think that yes, it may be a small market potentially at the moment, but if you can get ahead of it, you're setting yourself up for the next 5 generations. I like she's saying, maybe it's not today, is what you're saying, but I think it is there. And the people that are the younger generation, when we are in those positions, when we have the corporate credit card and we can buy, we're not going to be gone. So that's just a second what she's saying. But the second, just back to you were asking about digital marketing and how we spend a ton of money on that. And partly in addition, we own multiple brands that are technically competitors, but we really just position them separately in the market.
It's kind of like the hotel industry, right?
Yeah. And so a couple of things point is, one, if you already have a gathered list of contacts that may be kind of falling off, you can take that exact email list and import them into your Google and into Facebook, and then you can actually just market to those people. Because you know that even though people who are buying your t-shirts, talking to your sales guy, they're still going to Google and typing in best screen printed t-shirt. You can bid on that. So that's number one to target everybody. The other one that we don't use it a lot, but I know people do, and I think for you trying to go after corporate, I think you should look at LinkedIn marketing. Because that's that really, I think, versus something like Facebook. Because even our market is actually relatively small. There's only we serve the tattoo market. There's only maybe 50,000 customers across the whole U.S. So we have a relatively small market, and we've had some success on Facebook, but it's actually not necessarily one that we because again, it's.
But you like LinkedIn better. What's your
Well, we
company
haven't
do?
used, like, we use Google. I mean, really, that's where I spend 95% of my money is on Google.
What's your company do?
So we sell tattoo supplies and then we sell pet supplies. So we got two different divisions.
Very interesting. Have you been reading about Chewy and PetSmart this week?
Yeah, so I spend less on the pet side and mostly mine on the tattoo side, but, and we're more focused on the grooming side, so we sell professionals. But yeah, it's fascinating. So I think that's where I would explore.
That's part of one of our legacy issues is that we used to say, gee, everybody's a potential customer for our product. That is true. But everybody isn't necessarily the best customer for you. And it's not that we're trying to rule anybody out. At the same time, we're just trying to find our best opportunity. What else? Mark?
Is there any margin, as you go further down from colleges to high schools to, is there any margin in these, like, the team sites for all the USSSA baseball and all those youth uniform T-shirt sites?
Is there margin in it?
Yeah, I mean, is it worth competing in that space, or is that all?
We have found that I have to phrase this carefully. You watch organizations like Lids that have gotten in and out of the business. You know, you see them crash themselves based on the fact that they overpromise, underdeliver, and don't have the pricing necessarily to sustain their organization. Okay. So we're really careful about specific markets that people are trying to play in with the following question. Are they using our items to build their brand, or are they using the items to subsidize themselves? Because the minute they start trying to add a fee to it, to use it as a fundraiser, then it gets priced out of the market and becomes a problem in terms of overall sales. And so, for example, pick on City High for just a second. City High School, we started working with their spirit group about 20 years ago. And the interesting thing about it was that the folks involved in that said very specifically, we want these price points. And they wanted to make sure that there was a $5 t-shirt in there so that the kid who could not afford anything else at least had spirit wear with their $5 shirt. And part of their plan was, we're going to buy some of those and just give them away, okay? Everybody on Friday should be able to wear red and white at City High School. We thought that's terrific, that's right. Okay, but what has crept into their spirit wear store over the course of time is, yes, brands, okay? And part of that is Nike's doing because they're trying to provide all the uniforms to City High, and then they give John Bacon, I like John a lot, I'm not picking on him either, some of the nicest apparel that you'll ever find, and he's sporting that, and people are saying, well, gee, I want to wear what John Bacon's wearing, okay? Well, Nike controls that very, very closely, and you can only get some of the things that he's wearing through their uniform division, which they won't allow us to participate in. And we understand they're trying to carve out that segment of the market for them. So what has happened over the course of time is the Spiritwear site has become more and more looking like a department store with price points that, yes, we still try to provide the $5 t-shirt, but there are items in there that are $75 and $80. You know, and you look at that and say for the average family, that's a pretty expensive undertaking, and so on. So it kind of depends. You know, and the Spiritwear folks are trying to use that in part to use its money back to the booster club. So we understand there's a component to it that is oriented towards support, and we think that's important. It's just, for us, it became a problem providing that because, you know, we would make the pitch for the $80 item and then we'd have one of them.
Right.
You know, and so we could embroider one, that wasn't that big of a deal, but in terms of setting up a machine, it was somewhat expensive. And anyway, if there was a problem with the return or whatever, I got the wrong size, you know, then we had other issues. Or that they have a garage sale every November trying to get rid of the stuff that either they got back or that didn't sell for one reason or another. So anyway, it's a tricky deal. If the focus stays on enhancing the brand and improving the mission, it's good. With a marginal or a nominal amount related to fundraising, that's fine. But what we see on the corporate side is all of a sudden people say, well, I can subsidize my advertising budget with this. And therefore, you know, they're trying to, you know, put a shirt on every teller at the bank, for example, but they're charging them more than the shirt actually cost them. We don't think that's really, you have to be careful doing that because all of a sudden, you know, maybe they won't buy it for the Saturday morning where everybody's wearing the shirt. And I'm not picking on anybody here locally. They all do nice things for their employees and so forth. But anyway, it's an interesting market, yes.
So the tailgate clothings and some of these other retailers, do they all have their own shops behind them? Do they RP some of that out? I mean, how do you get into serving some of those retail where there would be a larger buy?
I do know that some of them do kind of a spoken and hub kind of approach, and some printers work that way as well, where you there's a Iowa Book, for example. I know he has some decorating equipment. Kurt's a good friend of mine. I like him a lot. And they do 1 off or 5 off, or one of each size for the side of the put on. And if an item really takes off, then they go out and find a contract decorator to do it for them. Okay, and there are a lot of contract decorators out there that do embroidery or what have you. I know that Underground Printing, for example, is a franchise. There's one at Purdue. Okay, one of the side benefits of paying all that tuition is you get to go to the school and see what else is in their marketplace, and there they are. I think that's more of the hub and spoke kind of model. If they get a big order, somebody in another town, and I don't know where it is producing that. Less overhead than here on the Ped Mall, and then shipping out, putting it in the store, and saying, okay, here's the custom order for the person that's done here. So that happens a lot. I know that there's the thing I was trying to think of, there's a t-shirt company that contracts with local decorators. They take the order nationally and then job it back to somebody locally and produces it, so forth. The photo book business is a lot that way too. Okay, if you buy a photo book, you might be thinking you're buying it from somebody in the East Coast or the West Coast. There's a good chance it's being manufactured in Cedar Rapids.
The Shutterfly type things?
Yes. Yep. So, and they're smart. They're distributing their production out to people that are willing to take the risk buying the equipment, so they don't have to. 4Imprint's doing the same thing. They don't really want to own any production facilities. There's a lot of risk in that. They just have figured out a way to approach the market in a very different way, and hats off to them. It's been quite successful for them. So they still have a sales force. They just don't have one that you traditionally think about. So anyway.
In the interest of time, I'm going to ask the final question. What can we as a community do to help you?
Well, that's a great question. I would say that participate in your local community as best you can, buy locally as best you can, and be aware of what's going on locally as best you can. There's a lot of neat things happening in Iowa City. I'm a big fan of the Downtown Association because of all the neat things they do here in Iowa City in particular to get people out to have a conversation, to think about the area, to be event driven and so forth. I'm excited about the Oktoberfest this weekend. I've never been to it before, but it worked out that I'm in town, so I'm excited about that. I have no idea what to expect, but I'm looking forward to it. Participate. It's what makes Iowa City great. What makes the whole area great. So I know that because you are here, you're doing that. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
You bet.